Mom, we weren't expecting you for Christmas this year. Jessica's family is coming, and we need the space. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood on my son's doorstep, arms full of wrapped presents, the December wind cutting through my coat. Kevin didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Behind him, Jessica leaned against the hallway wall, examining her manicured nails. But I always come for Christmas, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Well, things change, Jessica chimed in, finally meeting my eyes. Besides, you have your own apartment now, don't you? Your own apartment. As if I'd chosen to downsize from my beautiful 4-bedroom house to a cramped 1-bedroom just for fun. As if I hadn't spent the last 15 years paying the mortgage on the very house they were now barring me from. I looked at Kevin, searching for any trace of the boy who used to run into my arms every Christmas morning. He shifted uncomfortably, but didn't invite me in. That's when I decided to check something I should have verified years ago. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of tears and memories. 15 years. That's how long I'd been paying for their house, sacrificing everything for a promise that now felt like a cruel joke. It started when Kevin was 20, just 2 years after his father died. I was still reeling from the loss, trying to navigate widowhood while keeping our family afloat. Kevin had come to me with those puppy dog eyes I could never resist. Mom, Jessica and I found the perfect starter home. We just need help with the down payment and mortgage. I promise when you're older, you'll always have a place with us. Always have a place with us. The irony burned like acid in my throat. I'd sold my house, the one Tom and I had built our dreams in, and moved into a modest apartment in Minneapolis. Every month, like clockwork, I sent Kevin $1,800 for the mortgage. I clipped coupons, skipped vacations, wore the same winter coat for a decade. But it was worth it, I told myself. I was investing in my future, in the promise of family. The paperwork from that time was all packed away in storage. I'd been so trusting, so eager to help my only child build his life. Kevin had handled most of the documentation, assuring me everything was in order. I'd signed where he pointed, too grief-stricken and overwhelmed to read the fine print. For the first few years, it worked. Kevin called regularly, thanking me for my sacrifice. "You're the best mom in the world," he'd say. "Jessica and I are so grateful. We're fixing up the guest room just for you." I'd lived on those promises, each thank you warming me through another month of penny pinching. When my friends traveled to Florida for the winter, I stayed in Minneapolis, watching the snow pile up outside my apartment window, comforting myself with the thought that one day I'd be surrounded by grandchildren in that house I was paying for. But everything changed when Jessica really entered the picture. Oh, she'd been around before, but after their wedding 5 years ago, her influence grew like a cancer. The grateful phone calls dwindled. The invitations to Sunday dinner became sporadic, then stopped altogether. Still, I kept sending the checks, $1,800 a month, rain or shine, even when my arthritis flared up and I could barely afford my medication. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? We give until there's nothing left. But standing on that doorstep, shut out in the cold, I realized something had to change. The signs had been there for years. I just hadn't wanted to see them. After Kevin married Jessica 5 years ago, the transformation was gradual, like watching ice slowly form over a pond until suddenly you couldn't see the water anymore. Jessica had a way of making me feel small without saying anything overtly cruel. "Oh, Barbara, you're still in that same apartment?" she'd say at family gatherings, her voice dripping with false concern. "Kevin, we really should help your mom find something nicer." But they never did, of course. They were too busy renovating their house, my house, with the money I kept sending. The first Thanksgiving I wasn't invited to was 3 years ago. Kevin called the night before, his voice strained. "Mom, Jessica's family is doing a big thing this year, and you know how her mother gets when there are too many people." Too many people. I was one too many. I spent that Thanksgiving eating a turkey TV dinner, telling myself it was just 1 year. But the following year, it was Jessica's sister who needed the space. Then Jessica's cousin from out of town. There was always someone more important than the woman paying their mortgage. The Facebook incident happened 2 years ago. My neighbor, sweet Mrs. Henderson, had helped me set up an account so I could see photos of Kevin and Jessica. I was scrolling through, smiling at pictures of their renovated kitchen, granite countertops I'd essentially paid for, when I saw Jessica's post. "So blessed to have a drama-free holiday season. Sometimes you have to set boundaries with toxic people, even if they're family. Blessed, healthy boundaries. Peaceful home." The comments were even worse. Her friends congratulating her on being so strong and protecting her space. One even wrote, "Good for you. In-laws can be such a burden." A burden. That's what I'd become. I started keeping records after that. Every check, every bank transfer, every receipt. It wasn't that I planned to use them. It just made me feel less crazy. Proof that I existed, that my contributions mattered, even if my presence didn't. The wedding gift still stung. When Kevin and Jessica married, I'd given them $10,000, my entire emergency fund. "For your future," I'd said, hugging them both. Jessica had barely mumbled a thank you, too busy showing off her ring to her bridesmaids. That money went toward a hot tub I'd never been invited to use. Kevin called less and less. When he did, Jessica was always in the background, her voice carrying just enough for me to hear. "Is that your mom again? Doesn't she have friends her own age?" But I kept sending the money, $800 every month, automatic transfer on the first. It was the one connection I had left, the one thing that made me feel like I was still part of their lives, even if they didn't want me in their home. I began writing everything down in a journal, not just the financial records, but the conversations, the excuses, the subtle cruelties. December 15th, Kevin said they couldn't come for my birthday. Jessica had a spa appointment. June 3rd, not invited to Memorial Day barbecue. Neighbors asked where I was. Looking back, I should have seen what was happening. But when you love someone, you make excuses. You tell yourself they're busy, they're stressed, they'll come around. I was about to learn just how wrong I'd been. 2 months before that devastating Christmas rejection, Kevin called with a request that finally shattered my rose-colored glasses. It was a Sunday evening, and I was settling in with a cup of tea when my phone rang. "Mom, we need to talk about the house," he began without preamble. "No, how are you, or how's your health been?" "What about the house?" I asked, though my stomach was already knotting. "Jessica and I need $50,000 for renovations. The foundation needs work, and the roof is getting old. Since you've been living rent-free all these years, we figured it's the least you could do." Living rent-free? I nearly dropped my cup. Before I could respond, I heard Jessica grab the phone. "Barbara, let's be honest here. You've had a free ride long enough. Kevin's been too nice to say anything, but we need that money by next month. It's only fair after everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "I've never even lived in that house. I've been paying your mortgage for 15 years from my tiny apartment." "Don't be dramatic," Jessica snapped. "The occasional payment hardly counts as occasional. I send $1,800 every single month." There was a pause. I heard muffled voices, then Kevin came back on. Look, Mom, we need this money. If you can't help family when they need it, then maybe we need to reconsider our relationship. Reconsider our relationship. My own son was threatening to cut me off if I didn't hand over my life savings. I need time to think, I managed. You have a week, Kevin said coldly and hung up. I sat in my dark apartment, shaking, not from cold, but from the realization that my son, my baby boy, had become someone I didn't recognize. Or maybe I was finally seeing who he'd always been. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. George Brennan was a retired cop who specialized in financial fraud. When I explained my situation, his weathered face grew grim. Mrs. Mitchell, I see this more often than you'd think. Family members taking advantage of elderly parents. Let me look into the property records. I'm not elderly, I protested weakly. I'm only 62. He smiled kindly. Of course not. But let's make sure everything is above board with that house you've been paying for. 3 days later, George called with a strange tone in his voice. Barbara, I need you to sit down. I found something interesting about your property deed. What kind of interesting? The kind that changes everything, but I need to verify a few more things before I can be certain. In the meantime, don't do anything. Don't send them any money. Don't sign anything. And whatever you do, don't let them know you're investigating. What did you find? I pressed. Let's just say your name appears in some very interesting places on the legal documents. Places your son might not want you to know about. Give me another week, and I'll have the full picture. I hung up with my mind racing. What could be on those documents? What had Kevin hidden from me? For the first time in years, I felt something other than hurt and confusion. I felt hope, and maybe, just maybe, the stirring of righteous anger. Which brings me back to that horrible December morning, standing on Kevin's doorstep with my arms full of presents and my heart full of foolish hope. Even after his threat 2 months earlier, even after starting the investigation, I'd still believed Christmas would be different. Christmas had always been our sacred time. Kevin, please, I tried one more time. I brought Tommy's favorite cookies, the ones with the reindeer. Tommy's 8 now, Mom. He doesn't care about cookies. Kevin glanced nervously over his shoulder. Look, just go home. We'll call you after the holidays. Mrs. Henderson was getting her mail across the street. I saw her pause, watching us with concern. The humiliation burned hotter than the winter wind. Fine, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Merry Christmas to you too. I turned and walked back to my car with as much dignity as I could muster, those wrapped presents weighing 1,000 pounds in my arms. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Jessica's Instagram story on my phone at a red light. She was already live streaming their perfect family Christmas, showing off the house I'd paid for, the decorations I'd never see up close. Look at our forever home, she gushed to her followers. So blessed to have our own space for the holidays. Our forever home, built on my sacrifices, furnished with my dreams. Back in my apartment, I set the rejected presents on my small table and made myself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. The silence was deafening. This was supposed to be my retirement, surrounded by family. Instead, I was alone, shut out by the very people I'd given everything to protect. My laptop chimed. An email from George Brennan with the subject line, Urgent, read immediately. I opened it with trembling fingers. Barbara, I've confirmed what I suspected. Your name is still on the property deed as co-owner. Kevin attempted to transfer full ownership to himself and Jessica 2 years ago, but the documentation was never properly notarized or filed. Legally, you own 50% of that house. Moreover, the forgery is clear enough that you could press charges if you chose to. Call me first thing tomorrow. We need to discuss your options. I read it 3 times before it sank in. My name was still on the deed. Kevin had tried to steal my ownership but failed. He'd been lying to me, threatening me, shutting me out of a house I legally co-owned. The rage that flooded through me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't hot and wild. It was cold, crystalline, and absolutely certain. My son hadn't just rejected me, he'd tried to rob me. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my banking app. There it was, the automatic payment scheduled for January 1st. $1,800 like clockwork for 15 years. My finger hovered over the cancel button. All those years of scrimping and saving, all those missed vacations, skipped dinners out, worn out clothes. I'd lived like a pauper so they could live like kings in a house they'd tried to steal from me. I thought about little Tommy, who apparently didn't care about his grandmother's cookies anymore, about Jessica's family filling the space where I should have been, about Kevin's cold eyes as he shut the door in my face. I pressed cancel. Then I picked up my phone and called the bank's 24-hour line. I had more changes to make, and I was going to make them all before the sun rose on another day of being anyone's fool. Have you ever felt like you're being used by the very people you die for? I spent 15 years believing my sacrifices meant something, that every dollar I sent was building a future where I'd be cherished and included. Instead, I discovered my own son saw me as nothing more than an ATM with a heartbeat. But here's what I learned, and what I need you to understand if you're going through something similar. Love doesn't mean letting people drain you dry. It doesn't mean accepting disrespect or financial abuse. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say, enough. And that's exactly what I was about to do. Stay with me, because what happens next will show you that it's never too late to reclaim your power. The morning after Christmas, I sat in Attorney Miller's office, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Robert Miller came highly recommended by George Brennan, and his office walls were covered with awards for elder advocacy and financial fraud cases. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the documents spread across his mahogany desk, "what your son attempted here is textbook financial elder abuse, though I know you don't see yourself as elderly." "I'm not elderly," I said automatically, then sighed. "But I am a fool." "No," he said firmly. "You're a mother who trusted her son. There's no shame in that. The shame belongs to those who betrayed that trust." He pulled out the deed paperwork, pointing to specific lines. "See here? Your name is listed as 50% owner, and here, where Kevin tried to transfer ownership, the notary seal is clearly forged. He used an expired stamp number from a notary who died 3 years ago." My stomach turned. He researched dead notaries? It appears so, but he made a crucial mistake. The property transfer was never filed with the county. Legally, you're still co-owner, and you have every right to take action. "What kind of action?" Miller leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You have several options. First, you could demand immediate repayment of all mortgage payments you've made, with interest. My calculation shows that's roughly $324,000 over 15 years, plus interest brings it to nearly $400,000. The number made me dizzy. $400,000. I'd given them nearly $500,000. Second, he continued, you could file for partition sale, force them to sell the house, and give you your 50% share. Third, and this is what I'd recommend given their behavior, you stop making payments immediately. Without your payments, they'll face foreclosure within 90 days unless they can cover the mortgage themselves. Can they? I asked, though I suspected the answer. George's investigation shows they're carrying $200,000 in credit card debt. Kevin makes $65,000 a year. Jessica works part-time at a boutique. They've been living entirely beyond their means, funded by your payments. He slid another document across the desk. There's more. Jessica's been shopping around with real estate agents, getting estimates on the house value. Current market? About $450,000. I believe they're planning to sell once you finish paying off the mortgage in 6 months. The calculated cruelty took my breath away. They were literally counting down the days until they could cash out and discard me entirely. There's something else, Miller said gently. George found text messages between Kevin and Jessica from last month. They were discussing nursing homes for you, specifically the cheapest ones that would accept Medicaid patients. I thought I'd felt rage before. I was wrong. This was rage, pure, clean, and absolutely justified. They weren't just planning to abandon me. They were planning to warehouse me in some cut-rate facility while they lived high on my life savings. What do you recommend? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Stop all payments immediately. Document everything. If they contact you, record it. Minnesota is a one-party consent state. Don't tell them about your legal knowledge yet. Let them show their true colors. People like this always overplay their hand when they're desperate. What about my grandson, Tommy? Miller's expression softened. I understand that's painful, but consider this. What lesson is Tommy learning from his parents' behavior? Sometimes the best thing you can do for a child is show them that actions have consequences. I thought about that little boy who used to run into my arms, now being taught that grandmothers were disposable. You're right. What's the first step? Already done. You canceled the automatic payment. Now we wait. They'll notice when the January payment doesn't arrive. That's when things will get interesting. As I left Miller's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: control. For so long, I'd been at their mercy, grateful for scraps of attention, paying for the privilege of being occasionally acknowledged. But now I held the cards, and they didn't even know it. I stopped at the bank on my way home and moved my savings to a new account at a different bank, one Kevin didn't know about. The teller, a young woman about Jessica's age, was extra kind when she saw my shaking hands. Starting fresh? She asked gently. Yes, I said, managing a smile. It's never too late for that, is it? Never, she agreed, handing me my new account information. My grandmother always said the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. I thought about that all the way home. I couldn't get back the 20 years I'd wasted, but I could sure as hell make sure the next 20 were different. And it would start with teaching my son a lesson he should have learned long ago. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, especially when that hand holds the deed to your house. 3 days after New Year's, I played the role of my life. I called Kevin, letting my voice quaver just enough to sound vulnerable, but not suspicious. Honey, I've been thinking about Christmas, I began. I overreacted. I should have understood about Jessica's family. Could I maybe come see Tommy? Just for an hour? The pause on the other end was calculating. I could practically hear the gears turning in Kevin's head. Mom, he said, his tone suddenly warmer. Of course you can see Tommy. Why don't you come for dinner Thursday? Too easy. They wanted something. Thursday evening, I arrived with a toy truck for Tommy and my phone recording in my purse. Jessica greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Barbara, so good to see you. Come in from the cold. The house looked different. New furniture in the living room, a massive TV on the wall. I did quick math. That was at least $10,000 in new purchases. while carrying $200,000 in credit card debt. Tommy ran up and hugged my legs, and my heart cracked a little. Grandma, Mom said you were too busy to visit. Never too busy for you, sweetheart, I said, shooting Jessica a look. She had the grace to appear uncomfortable. Dinner was awkward, full of forced conversation. I complimented Jessica's cooking, admired their renovations, played the role of the grateful mother perfectly. Then, as Jessica cleared the plates, she made her move. Barbara, we're so glad you're here. Families should stick together, especially when times are tough. Tough? I asked innocently. Kevin jumped in. The economy, you know. Everything's more expensive. The house needs maintenance, Tommy's school fees. Here it comes, I thought. Actually, Jessica said, returning from the kitchen, we've been meaning to discuss something with you. Once the mortgage is paid off, which should be soon thanks to your help, we're thinking of selling. The market's great right now. Oh? I kept my voice neutral. And where would you go? Florida, Kevin said. Better weather, better schools for Tommy, better everything, really. That sounds lovely, I said, stirring my coffee. Will there be room for me to visit? The silence stretched too long. Jessica finally laughed, a tinkling fake sound. Of course, you could stay in a nearby hotel. There are some lovely senior communities down there, too. Senior communities. I wanted to throw my coffee in her face. Speaking of the house, Kevin said too casually, we noticed the mortgage payment hasn't hit yet this month. Did you forget to send it? Oh dear, I said, touching my forehead. I've been so scattered lately. I'll look into it. Mom, Kevin's voice took on an edge. You need to be more careful. We could lose the house if payments are late. We, as if he'd ever paid a dime. I understand, I said meekly. I'll check my banking tomorrow. After dinner, while Jessica put Tommy to bed, I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead I slipped into Kevin's home office. His computer was open, unlocked. Careless, I quickly photographed everything I could find, emails to real estate agents about the house value, Jessica's online shopping history showing thousands in luxury purchases, and then, jackpot, an email thread between Jessica and her sister. Once we sell Mom's house, we'll be set. Kevin's mother won't be an issue. We've already looked into Sunset Manor. It's Medicaid approved. Mom's house. They were already calling it theirs. I heard footsteps and quickly returned to the bathroom, flushing the toilet just as Jessica knocked. Everything okay in there, Barbara? Just fine, dear, I called back, making sure my phone was securely in my pocket. Back in the living room, Kevin handed me a document. While you're here, Mom, could you sign this? It's just updating some paperwork for the house insurance. I pretended to fumble for my reading glasses, buying time to actually read it. It was another property transfer form, more sophisticated than the last attempt. This time with a real notary scheduled to come by next week. I'll need to review this with my, what do you call it? My eye doctor said I shouldn't sign things without proper lighting. I babbled. Can I take it home? Kevin's jaw tightened. Mom, it's just insurance paperwork. I know, dear, but you know how careful I have to be at my age. I tucked the document in my purse. I'll bring it back next week. As I left, I heard Jessica hiss to Kevin. I told you she's losing it. We need to move faster. Losing it? No, Jessica. I was finding it. Finding my backbone, my self-respect, and every piece of evidence I needed to bury them legally. In my car, I texted George, got the motherlode. They're planning to sell the moment the mortgage is paid, and I have evidence of elder fraud intent. His response was immediate. Bring everything tomorrow. Time to turn the tables. 6 months, they'd said. 6 months until they could sell their house and dump me in a cut-rate nursing home. They had no idea their 6 months had just become 6 days until their world imploded. January's autopay cancellation was just the first domino. By the third week of January, the panicked calls began. "Mom, the bank called. They said the mortgage payment bounced. What's going on?" Kevin's voice was tight with barely controlled anxiety. "Oh no," I said, injecting confusion into my voice. "Bounced? But I have money in my account." "Did you forget to transfer it?" "Mom, this is serious." "Let me check my papers," I said, rustling some magazines near the phone for effect. "Everything's been so confusing lately. Where did I put those bank statements?" "Mom," Kevin snapped, "just send the payment now. Today, we can't have a late payment on our record." Our record, still claiming ownership of something he'd tried to steal. "I'll go to the bank tomorrow," I promised vaguely. Or was it the credit union? I have accounts at both. The call ended with Kevin barely containing his frustration. I smiled, marking my calendar. Day 1 of their education in consequences. By February, the late notices were piling up. Kevin showed up at my apartment unannounced, Jessica waiting in the car with the engine running. He looked haggard, stress etched in lines around his eyes. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, pushing past me into my small living room. His eyes scanned the space, clearly looking for bank statements or checkbooks. "Would you like some tea?" I offered pleasantly. "I don't want tea." He spun around, and for a moment I saw his father in him. But Tom would never have looked at me with such calculating coldness. "I want to know why you're destroying our lives." "I don't understand," I said, settling into my recliner. "What's wrong?" "The mortgage, Mom. You haven't paid in 2 months. They're sending threatening letters." "Oh dear," I murmured. "I thought I paid that. Didn't I pay that? I've been so forgetful." Kevin began searching through my mail pile on the side table. I let him. I'd been careful to leave nothing important in view. "Where are your bank statements?" he demanded. "Bank statements?" I blinked owlishly. "I think they're in my filing cabinet. Or did I put them in the bedroom? I can never remember." "Mom, this is serious. We could lose the house." "But, honey, you said you were selling it anyway. To move to Florida, remember?" His face flushed. That's different. We need to sell it on our terms, not lose it to foreclosure." "Foreclosure?" I gasped. "But surely you and Jessica can cover 1 or 2 payments, just until I sort out my banking confusion." The silence told me everything. They couldn't cover even 1 payment. They'd been living entirely on my money, spending everything else on toys and trips, and maintaining their facade. Kevin tried a different approach, sitting beside me and taking my hand. His touch felt like a stranger's. "Mom, you know I love you, right? We're family. Family helps each other." "Of course, dear," I said, patting his hand. "That's why I've been paying your mortgage all these years." "Exactly. And we're so grateful that we want to help you, too. Maybe it's time you let us manage your finances. Make sure bills get paid on time, investments are handled properly." There it was, the power of attorney play. "Oh, that sounds complicated," I said. "I'd need to think about that. Maybe talk to someone." "No," Kevin said quickly, then forced a smile. "I mean, no need to bother anyone else. This is family business. In fact, I brought some paperwork that would help streamline everything." "Not today," I said firmly. "I'm tired and my show is about to start." Kevin's mask slipped completely. "Your show? Mom, we're about to lose our house, and you're worried about your show." "Judge Judy helps me think," I said mildly. "You should watch sometime. She's very educational about legal matters." He stared at me, and I could see him trying to figure out if that was a threat or just elderly rambling. The beauty was, he couldn't tell. After he stormed out, I watched from my window as he and Jessica argued in the car. She was gesturing wildly, probably berating him for not getting my signature. They sat there for 20 minutes, and I knew they were debating whether to come back up. Finally, they drove away, and I called Attorney Miller. "They're getting desperate," I reported. "Kevin tried to get me to sign power of attorney." "Perfect," Miller said. "Desperation makes people sloppy. Keep playing confused. The more panic they get, the more likely they are to do something we can use in court." "How long before foreclosure proceedings actually start?" "They've got another month before the bank gets serious, but I'm betting they'll crack before then." He was right. 2 weeks later, in mid-February, Jessica called me herself. Her voice was honey-sweet, but I could hear the acid underneath. "Barbara, dear, I think we need to have a woman-to-woman chat about Kevin. He's not handling the stress well. You know how men can be, too proud to ask for help properly. But between us girls, I know you don't want to see your grandbaby homeless, right?" Grandbaby. She'd never called Tommy that before. Desperation indeed. "Of course not," I said. "Tommy means everything to me." "Then you'll help us? You'll send the payment?" "I'll certainly try to figure out what's wrong with my banking," I promised. "These computers are so confusing." The call ended with Jessica barely maintaining her facade. I hung up and smiled. March was going to be very interesting indeed. March arrived with a pre-foreclosure notice and the complete unraveling of Kevin and Jessica's carefully constructed image. The notice was posted on their door for all the neighbors to see, a bright orange admission of financial failure. Mrs. Henderson called me that evening. "Barbara, I saw the notice on Kevin's door. Are you all right? I know you've been helping them." "I'm fine," I assured her. "Just some banking confusion on my end. I'm sure they'll sort it out." But Kevin wasn't sorting anything out. He was at my door the next morning with a document in his hand and desperation in his eyes. "Sign this," he said without preamble, shoving the paper at me. "Good morning to you too," I said calmly. "What is this?" "Power of attorney. Mom, I need you to sign this now, today. The bank is threatening to take our house." I looked at the document, pretending to struggle with the fine print. "I don't understand all these legal terms." "You don't need to understand," Kevin exploded. "Just sign it. For once in your life, just do what I ask without making everything difficult." For once in my life? After 15 years of unquestioning financial support? "Kevin," I said quietly, "I think I need to have a lawyer look at this." His face went white, then red. "A lawyer? Since when do you have a lawyer?" "Since I realized my son was trying to steal my house," I said, dropping all pretense. The silence was deafening. Kevin's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "What? What are you talking about?" "I know about the forged deed transfer, Kevin. I know my name is still on the title. I know you and Jessica have been planning to sell the house and put me in a nursing home. I know everything. Mom, I don't know what you think you know, but I have the emails, Kevin, the texts, the forged documents. Your wife discussing with her sister how to get rid of me once the house is paid off." I pulled out my phone and played a recording of Jessica's voice. "Once we sell Mom's house, we'll be set." Kevin sank into my couch, the power of attorney form crumpling in his fist. "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I said. "The question is, what are you going to do now?" "Mom, please," his voice cracked. "We'll lose everything. Tommy will be homeless. Is that what you want?" "What I wanted," I said, my voice steady despite the pain in my chest, "was a son who loved me. What I wanted was to grow old surrounded by family who valued me for more than my bank account. What I wanted was to not be discarded like trash the moment I wasn't useful anymore." "It wasn't like that." Yes, it was. I stood up, 15 years of suppressed hurt pouring out. Do you know I haven't had a real vacation in 15 years? Do you know I've worn the same winter coat for a decade because every penny went to your mortgage? Do you know I ate ramen noodles for dinner last week because my Social Security check was late and I'd already sent you my savings? Kevin's face crumbled. For a moment, I saw my little boy again, the one who used to cry when he skinned his knee. But then Jessica's voice cut through from the hallway. She'd been listening the whole time. Don't fall for it, Kevin. She's manipulating you. She's probably senile. We can use that. And just like that, my son's face hardened again. You're right, Jess, he said, standing up. Mom's clearly not thinking straight. No rational person would destroy their own family like this. Get out, I said quietly. Mom, get out, I shouted, surprising us both. And tell your wife that if she posts one more lie about me on social media, my lawyer will add defamation to the lawsuit. Lawsuit? Jessica appeared in the doorway, her perfectly made-up face pale. You can't sue us. We're family. Family? I laughed bitterly. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't plan to abandon their mother. Family doesn't steal. We never stole anything, Jessica protested. That house is ours. We've been living there, maintaining it. With my money, I cut her off. Every improvement, every repair, every single mortgage payment came from my account. I have 15 years of bank records to prove it. Kevin grabbed Jessica's arm. We need to go. But, now Jess. As they reached the door, I called out one last thing. Kevin, you have two choices. Come clean about everything. The forgery, the plans to sell, all of it, and work with me to find a solution. Or keep lying and lose everything. You have 1 week to decide. They left without another word. I sank back into my chair, exhausted but oddly exhilarated. The truth was out. The pretense was over. Now came the hard part, watching my son face the consequences of his choices. My phone buzzed. A text from George Brennan. Just saw Jessica's Facebook post calling you unstable. Screenshot saved. Want me to forward to Miller? Yes, I typed back. Let's document everything. The war was officially on, but for the first time in years, I wasn't fighting from a position of weakness. I was fighting from a position of truth. And truth, as Judge Judy always said, was the ultimate weapon. I know some of you are thinking I'm being too harsh, that I should just forgive and forget, keep enabling my son's behavior because that's what mothers do. But let me ask you something. If your child was planning to lock you away in a nursing home after bleeding you dry financially, would you really just smile and write another check? I gave Kevin 15 years to show me he valued me as more than a cash machine. Instead, he and his wife were counting down the days until they could discard me like yesterday's garbage. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. And believe me, the consequences were about to get much more serious than Kevin ever imagined. The week I gave Kevin to come clean passed in silence. No calls, no visits, nothing. So on day 8, I played my ace, the card I'd held close for 20 years. I sat in Attorney Miller's office with George Brennan and made the call that would change everything. Hello, Dad? I said when the familiar voice answered. It's Barbara. I think it's time. Yes, my father was alive. 85 years old, sharp as a tack, and living in a luxury retirement community in Scottsdale. The man Kevin thought had died when he was 15. About damn time, Dad growled over the speakerphone. I've been waiting 20 years for you to stop protecting that ungrateful brat. Miller and George exchanged glances. I'd finally told them the whole truth that morning. Mr. Peterson, Miller said. Can you confirm for the record why you've been estranged from your grandson? Because he's a thief, Dad said bluntly. Stole $5,000 from my safe when he was 15. Cash I'd been saving for Barbara's anniversary trip. Kid looked me in the eye and lied about it until I showed him the security footage. I closed my eyes, remembering that horrible day. Kevin had cried, begged, promised to pay it back. Dad had written him off completely. I told Barbara then, that boy's got a rotten core. But she insisted on protecting him, said losing his father had messed him up. So I made a deal. I'd pretend to be dead to him, but I'd be watching. And if he ever proved himself worthy, he'd inherit my estate. If not, Dad paused. Well, let's just say I've got other plans for that money. How much are we talking about, Mr. Peterson? George asked. $2 million and change, Dad said casually. Plus the house in Scottsdale and my investment portfolio. Would have all gone to Kevin if he'd grown up to be a decent man. Instead, he's trying to rob his mother blind. Dad, I said quietly, I need you to come to Minneapolis. Already booked my flight, he said. I land Thursday. And Barbara, I'm done hiding. That boy needs to face what he threw away with his greed. After we hung up, Miller leaned back in his chair. This changes everything. With your father's testimony about Kevin's pattern of theft, plus the forged documents, we have a powerful case. There's more, I said, pulling out an old envelope. Dad gave me this 20 years ago. Said to only open it if Kevin ever tried to steal from me. Inside was a notarized document signed by my father, stating that the house Kevin lived in, the one I'd been paying the mortgage on, actually belonged to a trust my father had set up. I wasn't just a co-owner, I was the trustee, with full power to evict anyone living there if they violated the trust's terms. One of the terms, I read aloud, is that no beneficiary shall commit fraud, forgery, or theft against another beneficiary. Miller whistled low. Kevin violated this the moment he forged that deed transfer. You can legally evict him immediately. But I won't, I said. Not yet. I want him to see his grandfather first, to understand exactly what his greed has cost him. George pulled up something on his tablet. Speaking of cost, Jessica's been busy. She's consulted 3 divorce attorneys in the past week. Of course she had. Rats and sinking ships. One more thing, I said, standing to leave. When Dad arrives, I want Kevin to think he's here for a different reason. Tell him Grandpa's lawyer needs to read the will. That should get his attention. Miller smiled. You've gotten devious, Barbara. No, I corrected. I've gotten wise. There's a difference. That evening, I called Kevin. He answered on the first ring. Apparently, the threat of losing his inheritance overrode his silent treatment. Mom? His voice was cautious. Your grandfather's lawyer called, I said calmly. There's been an issue with the estate. He needs to meet with us Thursday afternoon. Grandpa's estate? But he died 20 years ago. Yes, well, apparently there were some complications. Something about a trust that was never properly dissolved. The lawyer says it's urgent. I could practically hear the dollar signs in Kevin's head. Of course, Mom. What time Thursday? 2:00. Miller and Associates downtown. Oh, and Kevin, bring Jessica. The lawyer said all potential beneficiaries need to be present. We'll be there, he said quickly. Too quickly. I hung up and looked at the photo on my mantel. My father holding baby Kevin, both of them smiling. Dad had loved that boy once, had dreams of passing on the family legacy to him. Kevin had thrown it all away for $5,000 when he was 15. Now he was about to learn that some mistakes can't be undone, no matter how much you lie, cheat, or steal. The ghosts you think are buried have a way of coming back, and sometimes they come back angry. Thursday arrived with the kind of crisp spring weather that makes everything seem sharper, clearer. I arrived at Miller's office early, my hands steady despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. Dad was already there, sitting in Miller's private conference room. 20 years had aged him, but his eyes were still fierce, his jaw still set with the determination that had built his fortune. "You ready for this, sweetheart?" he asked, taking my hands. "I should have done this years ago," I admitted. "No," he said firmly. "You had to try. That's who you are. But now it's time for consequences." Kevin and Jessica arrived 10 minutes late, her in designer clothes they couldn't afford, him in a suit that had seen better days. They walked in expecting to discuss an inheritance. The color drained from Kevin's face when he saw who was sitting at the table. "Grandpa?" The word came out as a whisper. "Hello, Kevin," Dad said coolly. "You look surprised to see me." But, but you're dead. Mom said you died." "Your mother told you what I asked her to tell you," Dad corrected. "After you stole from me, I decided you didn't deserve the truth. But now we're done with lies." D. Jessica found her voice first. "This is ridiculous. You can't just fake your death and—" "Sit down," Dad commanded, and even Jessica obeyed. "We're here to discuss your future. What's left of it anyway?" Miller spread documents across the table. "Mr. Mitchell, are you aware that the house you're living in is owned by the Peterson Family Trust?" Kevin's eyes darted between me and Dad. "What? No, Mom and I own that house. Actually," Miller continued, "your mother is the trustee. You're merely a conditional beneficiary, and according to the trust documents, any beneficiary who commits fraud or theft against another beneficiary forfeits all rights." "This is insane," Kevin stood up. "Mom, tell them this is a mistake." I pulled out my phone and played the recording of Jessica. "Once we sell Mom's house, we'll be set." Then I laid out the forged deed transfer, the emails about nursing homes, the bank records showing 15 years of payments from my account. $5,000, Dad said quietly. "That's what you stole from me 20 years ago. I could have forgiven that. You were a kid. But instead of learning, you got worse. You found a woman just like you, and together you've been stealing from your mother for 15 years. "We never stole anything," Kevin protested. "She offered to help." "Did I offer to be put in a nursing home?" I asked. "Did I offer to be barred from Christmas? Did I offer to have my signatures forged?" Jessica turned on Kevin. "This is your fault. You said she was senile. You said the house was ours." "Shut up, Jess." "No, let her talk," Dad said. "Let's hear how you two plan to dispose of Barbara once you drained her dry." Jessica's face was ugly with rage. "She owes us. We gave her grandchildren. We included her in our lives." "Included me?" I laughed bitterly. "You haven't included me in anything for 3 years. I've been nothing but a checkbook to you." "Mom, please," Kevin's voice cracked. He actually dropped to his knees beside my chair. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Jessica pushed me. She said, 'Don't you dare blame this all on me,'" Jessica shrieked. "You were stealing from your family before I even met you." And there it was. The truth, finally. Miller cleared his throat. "Here's what's going to happen. Kevin, you're going to sign a confession admitting to the attempted fraud. You're going to agree to vacate the house within 30 days, and you're going to enter therapy to address your pattern of theft and deception. And if I don't, then we press charges," Miller said simply. "Forgery, elder abuse, fraud. With your grandfather's testimony about prior theft, you're looking at significant jail time." Kevin looked at me, tears streaming down his face. For a moment, I saw my baby boy, but I also saw the man he'd become. I'll sign, he whispered. I won't. Jessica stood up. I'll fight this. I'll tell everyone what you're doing. Elder abuse, harassment. Try it, Dad said coldly. I've got better lawyers and deeper pockets than you can imagine. And unlike Barbara, I don't have a sentimental bone in my body when it comes to people who hurt my daughter. Jessica grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving Kevin kneeling on the floor. The inheritance, Kevin, Dad said, standing to leave. $2 million, the house in Scottsdale, the investments. It was all gonna be yours. All you had to do was be a decent human being. Grandpa, please. That money? It's going to charity now. Every penny. Your mother's setting up a foundation for women who've been financially abused by their families. Dad walked to the door, then turned back. You stole $5,000 from me when you were 15, but that's nothing compared to what you stole from yourself. And with that, he left. Kevin signed the papers with shaking hands, then looked at me one last time. I love you, Mom, he said. I know, I replied, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need respect, honesty, and basic human decency. You forgot that. Maybe now you'll remember. The aftermath of that meeting was swift and brutal. Jessica filed for divorce within 24 hours, but not before launching a social media campaign that backfired spectacularly. Elder abuse alert! Her Facebook post screamed. My husband's senile mother is trying to steal our home. She's being manipulated by lawyers. Please share. What Jessica didn't expect was for Mrs. Henderson to comment first. Senile. Barbara's sharper than you and me combined. I've watched her pay your bills for 15 years while you treated her like dirt. Shame on you. Then came George Brennan's daughter, who happened to be a social media influencer. This is Jessica Mitchell, who was caught on recording planning to dump her mother-in-law in a cheap nursing home after stealing her house. Receipts in thread below. The receipts went viral. Screenshots of Jessica's old posts bragging about her forever home. The recording of her calling me Mom's house. The forged documents. Within 6 hours, Jessica had deleted all her social media accounts, but the internet never forgets. Kevin, to his credit, didn't fight back. He showed up at my apartment the next week with a signed lease for a 2-bedroom across town and a receipt from a therapist. I started sessions yesterday, he said quietly. Dr. Morrison specializes in people like me, people who steal from family. That's a start, I said, not inviting him in. Mom, I need to tell you something. About Tommy. My heart clenched. Is he okay? He asks about you every day. Jessica tells him you're sick, but he doesn't believe her. He said, Kevin's voice broke. He said Grandma would visit if she could, that you always kept promises. That nearly undid me. You can bring him by on Saturdays, 1 hour, supervised. Thank you, he whispered. Mom, when I was 15, after Dad died, I was so angry. Grandpa had all that money and we were struggling, and I took it. And when he confronted me, I was too proud to admit it. So I lied. And then I kept lying. And it got easier and easier until lying became who you are, I finished. I know, Kevin. I've always known. I just hoped love would be enough to change you. Maybe it still can be, he said. With therapy, with time. Maybe, I said. But you'll have to prove it. Not with words, with years of consistent action. Meanwhile, Dad had moved into a hotel downtown, determined to stay until justice was fully served. He met with Miller daily, setting up the Barbara Peterson Foundation for financial abuse survivors. $2 million, he told me over lunch. That's just the start. I've got friends who want to contribute. Turns out, You're not the only parent who's been bled dry by ungrateful children. The house situation resolved quickly. Given the choice between eviction and prosecution, Kevin and Jessica agreed to vacate immediately. I put it on the market, priced to sell. The first offer came from a young family, a teacher and a nurse with twin daughters. "It's perfect," the wife said during the tour. "So much space for the girls to grow up in." "It's a good house," I agreed. "It just needs the right family." The closing was scheduled for May. Kevin would get nothing from the sale. The trust documents were clear about that. The proceeds would go toward repaying what I'd spent over the years, with the rest funding the foundation. Jessica tried one last play, showing up at my apartment with Tommy. "He misses his grandma," she said, pushing him forward. "Maybe we could work something out. Visitation in exchange for considerations." Using her own child as a bargaining chip. I looked at Tommy, confused and clearly uncomfortable. "Tommy, honey, would you like to see Grandma on Saturdays? Your dad already arranged it." His face lit up. "Really? Dad said you were too mad at us." "Never too mad for you, sweetheart. Never." Jessica's face twisted. "This isn't over. I'll get a lawyer." "With what money?" I asked calmly. "Kevin's credit is destroyed. You're divorcing him, and every lawyer in town knows about the forgery by now. But please, waste what little you have left on legal fees. My father would enjoy the entertainment." She grabbed Tommy and stormed off. But I knew she'd be back. Where else could she dump her son on Saturdays while she hunted for her next victim? The foundation's first recipient was Mrs. Chen from my apartment building. Her son had convinced her to take out a reverse mortgage, then disappeared with the money. We paid off the loan and set her up with a financial advisor. "You saved my life," she wept. "I thought I'd die on the streets." "No one should lose their home because they loved too much," I told her. "Not anymore." As I watched the moving trucks empty Kevin's house, my house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace, not happiness, exactly. You can't be happy when your only child has broken your heart, but peace that I could live with. Christmas came again, as it always does. A full year had passed since Kevin shut the door in my face, and everything had changed. I was preparing dinner in my apartment when the doorbell rang. Kevin stood there with Tommy, both holding wrapped presents. No Jessica. Their divorce had been finalized in October. "Mom," Kevin said quietly, "I know we didn't talk about Christmas, but Tommy has something for you." Tommy thrust forward a clumsily wrapped package. "I made it in art class, Grandma. It's a picture frame with our photo." Inside was a wooden frame he'd painted himself, holding a picture from 3 years ago, the last Christmas we'd all spent together, before everything fell apart. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, hugging him tight. "Would you like some cookies?" "Yes." He ran toward the kitchen, then stopped. "Dad, are you coming?" Kevin looked at me, uncertain. I stepped aside. "Come in, it's Christmas." We sat at my small table, Tommy chattering about school while Kevin remained mostly silent. He'd lost weight, his clothes were secondhand, and his hands showed calluses from the construction job he'd taken to pay bills. "Tommy," I said, "why don't you go watch cartoons while Dad and I talk?" Once he was settled in the living room, Kevin finally spoke. "I've been in therapy twice a week. Dr. Morrison says I'm making progress, but God, Mom, I can't believe what I did to you, what I became." "What does Dr. Morrison say about that?" "That I learned early to see people as resources, not relationships. After Dad died, I was so scared of being poor that I—" He shook his head. "That's not an excuse. Nothing excuses what I did." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't, but understanding why might help you change." "I've been paying you back," he said, pulling out an envelope. It's not much, $200 a month, but I'll pay back every penny. It'll take years, but Kevin, I interrupted, I don't want your money. But I owe you. You owe me honesty, respect, a relationship with my grandson that isn't transactional. Money? That's the least of what you took from me. He nodded, tears in his eyes. Jessica's engaged again. Some tech guy. She's already talking about moving to California. And Tommy? I'm fighting for full custody. I can't let her do to him what we did to you. He deserves better. For the first time in 2 years, I felt a spark of hope for my son. If you need a character witness for court, I'll be there. After everything, you're working 2 jobs, going to therapy, and fighting for your son. That's more effort than you've put into anything in 20 years. So yes, I'll help. But Kevin, one lie, one manipulation, one attempt to use me, and we're done forever. Understood. Understood, he said solemnly. We joined Tommy in the living room, where he'd found my photo albums. Grandma, who's this? He pointed to a picture of my father. That's your great-grandpa, I said. He's very old now, but still very much alive. Can I meet him? I looked at Kevin, who nodded slowly. Maybe someday, I said, when you're a little older. Dad had made it clear Kevin had no more chances with him. But Tommy? The boy's innocent, he'd said. When he's old enough to understand what his parents did, I'll meet him. Maybe there's still hope for the next generation. As they prepared to leave, Kevin turned at the door. Mom, the house I was going to steal from you? The one you paid for all those years? I drive by sometimes. The new family put up a swing set. There are always kids playing in the yard. It looks happy. It was always meant to be a happy house, I said. It just took the right family to make it one. We could have been that family, he said quietly. If I hadn't, if is a dangerous word, I cut him off. Focus on what is, not what if. After they left, I sat by my window watching the snow fall. My apartment was small but warm. My bank account was recovering. The foundation had helped 12 families so far, and somewhere across town, my son was learning to be the man he should have been all along. I picked up Tommy's handmade frame and placed it on my mantel. In the photo, we were all smiling, unaware of what was coming. But maybe that's the gift of photographs. They preserve the moment before everything changes, reminding us that happiness existed once and might exist again. My phone buzzed. A text from Kevin. Thank you for giving me another chance. I won't waste it. I didn't reply. Words were cheap. Time would tell. But for the first time in years, I went to bed on Christmas night without anger in my heart. Just a cautious hope that sometimes people can change, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the lesson, that love can exist alongside boundaries. The frame caught the moonlight, and I smiled. It wasn't the Christmas I'd once dreamed of, but it was real, and after years of lies, real was enough. Merry Christmas, I whispered to the empty room and meant it. I don't regret canceling that mortgage payment. It saved both of us, saved me from continuing to be a doormat, and saved my son from becoming completely lost to greed. If you're being financially abused by family, remember, setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't help someone who sees you as nothing but a wallet. So, I ask you, which side are you on? The side that enables abuse in the name of family, or the side that believes love means respecting boundaries? Choose wisely. Your future self will thank you.